Chapter 2453, The Escape, 2. The two guardians acknowledged her statement and went away promptly. Hence, only Gu Shijiu and Yun Yanli were outside the cabin. Yun Yanli was quite relieved to have Gu Shijiu with him. Although he was not certain if the actual Divine Lord was here in the Shura world, he was sure that Di Fui would not leave Gu Shijiu behind. As the Divine Lord preferred tranquility, Yun Yanli did not strike up a conversation. Nonetheless, Gu Shijiu did ask him about Zhu Duqing whereabouts, so Yun Yanli told her exactly what she wanted to know. The man had already left without telling him where he was going. Intensely, Yun Yanli gazed at Gu Shijiu. There was still a matter that had left him perplexed. Shijiu, has Mr. Zhu really acknowledged you as his master? Gu Shijiu answered briefly, yes. In that case, you must have been to the Devil Kingdom, right? That must be why you were out of touch with me for quite some time. I was worried about you. Yun Yanli looked at her with concern and care in his eyes. Gu Shijiu faked a chuckle as she said, I did not want you to worry about me. That is why I did not let you know that I went into the Devil Kingdom. Shijiu, you are bold. The surrounding devil aura will easily harm a pure celestial being like you. How did you get in there? With a frown, Gu Shijiu answered half-jokingly, why are you asking me so many questions? Is this an interrogation? Of course not. Shijiu, it is not what you think. I am just a little curious. Gu Shijiu heaved a sigh as she added, Brother Yun, curiosity sometimes kills the cat. Yun Yanli took a step forward and said, all right. Shijiu, I'll admit. I was really curious. The Devil Kingdom has been in a state of chaos, so I have always wanted to venture into the Devil Kingdom and rule the place. I wanted to give the people there a peaceful life. However, the dense devil aura has greatly limited my mobility. If you know any helpful information, please share it with me. He made his statement sound so righteous. I did not know that you wanted to become the ruler of the Devil Kingdom. What great ambition! Gu Shijiu said with a tone of sarcasm. Shijiu, I have wanted to put an end to their misery for some time now. In the future, I can appoint you as the Devil King. I will even consider Mr. Fui for the role if that is what pleases you. After he made his last statement, he stared at Gu Shijiu intently in hopes of getting some clues from her expression. However, Gu Shijiu remained composed. We can talk about this later. Brother Yun, haven't you said that there is something that you need to tell the Divine Lord? Now that no outsiders are present, I am sure that you can tell me about it, right? Yun Yanli stammered. About this. Shijiu, it is not that I cannot tell you, but it is a long story. As he spoke, Yun Yanli tried to peep into the cabin, but he could not see anything as the curtains had blocked the windows. It had been 4 or 5 minutes since the guardians went into the cabin. Meanwhile, some voices could be heard from the distance. In unison, they said, Governor. 4 men appeared simultaneously around the carriage and bowed courteously towards Yun Yanli. These 4 men were the most capable subordinates that Yun Yanli had. They were also the ones who had met Guardian Jin and Guardian Hua before. The 4 of them made their way here as soon as they saw the signal. Governor, what can we do for you? Yun Yanli looked at Gu Shijiu before asking his men, do you still recognize the 2 great guardians from the Devil Kingdom, Jin Mengzhou and Hua Qianjun? The men bowed together as they said, yes, we do. Great. Yun Yanli laughed out loud and grabbed Gu Zijia's hand. Shijiu, I have a show for you. Gu Shijiu wanted to break free from his grasp, but she knew that she would not be able to do so. Hence, she let him hold on to her hand. What show? She looked somewhat confused. Yun Yanli replied with a smirk, I am convinced that the 2 great guardians will potentially put Prince Nianma in danger. They have used false identities to stay undercover by his side. I am here to reveal their true intentions. Chapter 2454, The Escape, 3. He raised his hand, and a golden light shone towards the cabin. Bang! A loud explosion occurred. The entire cabin had been shattered into pieces. Yun Yanli was surprised by what he saw. The once elegant carriage was left with nothing but its base. No one was present inside. Could all four of the powerful men have perished as well? Yun Yanli knew that he had not utilized his full strength from before. Based on the capabilities of the four men, he was sure that they would be able to survive. Hence, he continued to look around in order to find them. All of a sudden, some dark-colored water clouded his eyes. A stream of pitch-black water was splashed directly onto his face. As the source came from a very close distance, he was unprepared. His face was immediately stained with dark ink, which temporarily blinded him. Fortunately for Yun Yanli, he had not let go of Gu Zijia's hand. As long as he had her, he still had the chance to win. He grabbed her wrist tightly with his left hand while trying to clean the ink from his face. He needed to make sure that he obtained his vision back. Before he could use the cleaning spell, he could tell that the person that was grasped in his left hand was suddenly slipping away. He quickly wiped away the black fluid that clouded his vision and was surprised by what he saw. His left hand was clearly grabbing onto a hand, but only a hand was present. Gu Shijiu was nowhere to be seen. Had she sacrificed her left hand in order to escape? Yun Yanli had never expected that. He then examined himself and realized that the ink-like fluid stained his entire face as well as his robes. There was a bad smell that accompanied the ink, and Yun Yanli was unsure if it was poisonous or not. He could not care less about his dirty outfit, but he had to find those people before they escaped. In a state of panic, he looked everywhere but could only see his men. Gu Shijiu was nowhere to be seen. "Where is she?" he reprimanded. His men were equally shocked by what just happened. She was still here just now," one of the men answered. Is the lady a squid-like creature? I saw her casting a stream of black ink onto the governor's face. Governor, we do not know if the ink is poisonous or not. You should clean it off first. His men continued to bombard him with concerns. Did she cast the ink from her mouth? He wondered. Yun Yanli was well aware of her skills in the use of poisons, but she would usually use the poison at the most unexpected time without anyone noticing it. He did not believe that she would actually cast the ink through her mouth. How did she keep so much ink in there anyway? It did not seem right. Perhaps, she was not the real Gu Shijiu. Yun Yanli quickly checked the hand that had been cut off. The skin felt soft and supple. Moreover, the flesh was neatly cut. It was not a horrendous sight at all. Instead, it was more like a prop with a subtle sense of horror. Yun Yanli paused a while before smelling the hand up close. His men were looking at him strangely at the time. What was the governor trying to do? Was he trying to take advantage of her amputated hand, just because he liked her? He definitely seemed like the kind of man who was into these gross things. Yun Yanli continued to sniff at the flesh. All of a sudden, he broke the silence with laughter. This is not her hand, he said in a seemingly relaxed tone. The men were stunned. What did he mean? Before Yun Yanli could explain anything, his smile slowly faded away and was replaced by disappointment. Gu Shijiu. He was obviously irritated. There was also a sense of frustration and helplessness in his mind. He flicked the amputated hand away as evil plans started to surface his mind. As the fake hand fell to the ground, he cast a streak of white light at it, turning the supple, little hand into a pink, elongated arm of a squid. Needless to say, the one who engaged with him was not Gu Shijiu. It was actually a squid monster that was eloquent and had the ability to change appearances. Gu Shijiu and Di Fui were long gone. Even Guardian Jin and Guardian Hua had escaped, too. Yun Yanli was fooled. Annoyed, he was certainly unhappy about the escape. He thought he already had her in his grasps. But right now, he realized how foolish he had been to believe so. Gu Shijiu could easily escape with her teleportation skill, but he could not figure out how the squid monster managed to run away. All of his men were there, but none of them witnessed anything. Get your weapons ready and wait for my signal. As soon as you see the signal, go after them immediately. Even though he was fooled, he was relieved by the fact that the Divine Lord was not actually here. If he was not mistaken, the squid monster must have been the one who impersonated the man. Bewildered, he never knew about the existence of such a powerful being in the Devil Kingdom. After all, he was right about his speculations. Di Fui was the new Devil King, and Gu Shijiu should be the one who stole his spiritual stones the other day. She must have found out a considerable amount about his plan. He took a deep breath, and the corners of his mouth immediately turned into a wicked smile. He knew very well that Gu Shijiu and the rest of them would not be able to escape from him so easily. His tracking ability was known to be the best in the entire continent. As long as they were still in the Shura world, there was no way they could avoid him. The only way they could escape was to return to the Devil Kingdom. However, the Devil Kingdom was thousands of miles away, and they had only been gone for a brief amount of time. Yun Yanli speculated that the furthest that they could go was about 300 miles. He started to plan what to do when he finally had them. He would not take things lightly anymore. His main priority was to capture Gu Shijiu. He was now willing to do so by any means. As for Di Fui, there was no way he would spare his life. The Shura world was his territory, so he should be the ruler of the place. He would not tolerate any forms of disorder where he ruled. Yun Yanli immediately started to perform the spell and activated a tracking spell. Time continued to pass, and it had already been an hour since their disappearance. Yun Yanli stood in the wild, looking at his surroundings with his teeth clenched. There was a goat that was wrapped in a dress that used to belong to Gu Shijiu. Yun Yanli stared at the goat, so it looked at him in return. Yun Yanli quickly snatched the dress away from it and examined it carefully. He saw a paper doll present inside the dress. All of a sudden, it burst into flames in his hand and was turned into ash before Yun Yanli could stop the fire. Yun Yanli was filled with utter indignation. His tracking spell should have followed the essence of her soul, not the scent of her body. It was rare for him to fail, but this was one of the times where he had to admit defeat. He thought that Gu Zijia's soul would be the most effective element he could use to track her down. Never had he expected that his spell would end up guiding him to the goat. The goat certainly did not bear any essence of her soul, but the paper doll was the key. Gu Shijiu must have attached part of the essence of her soul on the object to misguide him, leading him on an unfruitful chase. Meanwhile, he still could not figure out how she managed to put the essence of her soul onto a piece of paper. What kind of spell had she used? Unfortunately, as the paper doll was burned, he could not examine it anymore. He killed the innocent goat and stood there in contemplation. He asked himself, where would they be hiding? He heaved a regretful sigh at the realization that since Gu Shijiu knew how to make a paper doll, she could easily produce a second or even a third doll to mislead him. He had no idea what he would run into if he continued to track her soul. There could be a trap waiting for him at every corner. Therefore, he decided to change his target. Could he go after Di Fui? He was unsure, for Di Fui's soul was no longer the same. Also, he was Gu Zijia's top priority, so she would definitely make the same misleading paper dolls for him. Therefore, the result would be fruitless. However, as it would consume a great amount of her spiritual power to attach the essence of their souls onto the paper dolls, Yun Yanli guessed that Gu Shijiu would not do it for everyone else. If he decided to track down Guardian Jin and Guardian Hua, he should be able to find Gu Shijiu and Di Fui as well. Unfortunately, they had not physically engaged with Yun Yanli, so there was not a trace of their souls that Yun Yanli could use to make a clear path. Suddenly, he paused to think about the squid monster. He had part of the squid's arm in his possession and speculated that after the squid ran away, it would definitely go back to meet up with Gu Shijiu. He laughed at the faint trace of hope that he had of finding them. The trace guided him all the way to a sea of violent waves. Waves of water washed the shore and hit the corals with mighty splashes. By the sea, a person was sitting on one of the many corals that lined the coast. The person was elegantly dressed, with hair that was smoothly combed and long enough to touch the surface of the water, swirling around as gently as a revolving seaweed. The person sat with legs crossed and looked into the distance, seemingly preoccupied. It was already evening at the time. The sky was filled with rolls of emerging red clouds. The rain of blood, which occurred once every 10 days, was about to happen very soon. The blood rain was very poisonous. It had the ability to speed up the growth of most plants but caused mutation in most animals. As for the humans, their skin would immediately be eroded as soon as they came in contact with the raindrops. There was no cure for it. To make matters worse, the rain could even harm one's soul. Some people had claimed that the bats were actually the transformation of all the souls that had died innocently in the rain. Fortunately, the sea had the ability to dilute the eroding elements in the blood rain. Hence, when the rain occurred, deep-sea beings would remain unaffected. Only the animals that lived 2 or 3 meters below the surface would be harmed. Yun Yanli tracked the octopus creature all the way down here, only to find the person sitting on a coral. As the person was not facing Yun Yanli, he could not tell the gender of that individual. However, when tracing its soul, he was sure that the person must be the squid monster. Was he or she recovering by the sea? Had Gu Shizhou and the rest of them dived into the sea? Alarmed, the person turned around and stared at Yun Yanli. Yun Yanli could finally see the stranger's face and was shocked. The person had an enchanting face, centered with a high nose and a pair of bright, emerald eyes that were complemented with thick lashes. The creature had lips that were attractively tinted with a shade of pale red. Every time the person blinked, his or her watery eyes glistened vividly like the waves. Dressed with dark green robes that were elegantly embellished, the person had one arm that remained uncovered. Chains of shells and pearls circled the person's wrist and jingled with every move. It was melodious. The other arm was covered, so Yun Yanli could not tell if it was still attached. However, there was no sign of any apparent injury. The person slowly rose. The individual's robes danced in the gusts of wind. Yun Yanli was astonished as the person seemed to be naked under the loose robes. His or her bare, long legs were obviously noticeable. The smooth and supple skin of the person would catch the attention of any onlooker. There was only a silver bracelet that was secured on the person's ankle without any shoes. When he or she walked, the silver bracelet shone with sparkling lights following every step. Chapter 2457, The Ladyboy, 2. Was the person a man or a woman? Yun Yanli thought that he had observed almost everything about the stranger, but he still could not identify the gender of the person. The person was very tall, about 1.87 meters in height. The individual certainly had the physique of a man. In fact, he or she appeared to be wearing a man's robe. Nonetheless, the facial features of the creature seemed to resemble that of a woman. Every move the person made was elegant and sassy. "Why are you so late? I have been waiting for you for so long." The creature looked at Yun Yanli with tearful eyes, like a young lady who had been eagerly waiting for the arrival of her loved one. Yun Yanli was dumbstruck. Quietly, he performed a spell at his fingertips. "Do you have anything to do with Di Fui?" "Make a guess," the creature said while giving him a wink. Yun Yanli answered in an unimpressed tone, "You are one of his followers." "Silly. Why did you ask when you already knew?" The man flicked his fingers in a feminine manner. Could the stranger actually be a woman? "Where is Di Fui? Where is everyone?" Yun Yanli took another intimidating step towards the creature. His aura was so strong that none of the approaching waves managed to touch him. They just rolled away in different directions. "You sound so fierce." The creature took a step back and accidentally slipped and fell right into the water. Was Di Fui's comrade trying to escape by aqua drilling? Yun Yanli smiled smugly. Now that he had found the person, he would not let him or her go so easily like the first time. At that very moment, he slowly moved his fingers in a wave-like motion while seemingly clenching his fist. Immediately, the surrounding waves started to turn more and more violent. It seemed to be forming into the shape of a net. At the very center of the net lay the squid monster, seemingly helpless. The creature stood in the middle of the water net. The person's hair and clothes were thoroughly soaked. It winked again, and soon, droplets of water flowed from its thick lashes and streamed down its fair, lustrous cheeks, making it look like a beautiful woman in tears. The creature stared at Yun Yanli and asked, "How can a handsome man like you not know how to appreciate the beauty of a delicate woman? Did you really that I am merely a fish that you can capture with a net?" The stranger demanded, with a tone that indicated that it was rather annoyed. The answer was simple: Yun Yanli had seen more beautiful women than grains of sands. Most of the time, he did not even have a proper appreciation for their beauty. He gave the stranger a tight smile while clenching his fist. The water net resonated with his gesture, and slowly tightened towards the center, strangling the creature more and more. "I now ask you again. Where are Di Fui and the rest of them? If you refuse to tell me, I will cut you into 8 parts. The water net continued to squeeze the creature, but it did not even struggle one bit. "I will not tell you even if you are going to slice me into 18 pieces, he proudly said. He was a really stubborn man. Yun Yanli ignored its response and continued to tighten the net. The net was operated with a great amount of spiritual power and was able to execute many deadly attacks. The water net had now sliced through the innermost layer of the creature's clothes and started cutting into its flesh and veins. Other than its ability to impersonate others, the creature seemed to have no actual power. It could not break free from the water net. However, as the creature managed to escape the first time, Yun Yanli paid extra attention to it and watched it intently this time. "Ah, you are so cruel. How can you do this to me?" The creature began to sound teary. Yun Yanli gave him a hiss and disregarded the remark. The creature then deliberately winked its tearful eyes at Yun Yanli. "I guess I am not attractive enough. Should I take off my clothes?" it murmured. Yun Yanli did not know what to say. The stranger was obviously very open about its looks. Chapter 2458, The Ladyboy, 3. Yun Yanli seemed to have the impression that all the people from the Devil Kingdom were rather open and unshamed. Before Yun Yanli could continue questioning the man, the rare sight of the stranger's robes melting away caught his attention. First, the creature revealed its bare shoulders. Then, it revealed its refined arms, followed by its bare chest. Panicked, Yun Yanli quickly looked away. Something did not seem right. Did the stranger have a flat chest? It certainly seemed to be the case. Yun Yanli wanted to turn around and have another look, but that was when everything changed. A wave of dark water was approaching him in a violent motion. It was the same tactic again. Swiftly, Yun Yanli managed to keep the dark water a few feet away from him. He raised his hand to cast a spell that immediately formed a blue wall that could shield and keep the dark water away. The water had collided with the shield with a powerful force that would have shattered any ordinary objects. When the dark waves faded, Yun Yanli quickly checked on the creature and realized that the person was long gone. He was speechless. Although he had shifted part of his spiritual power toward the creation of the shield, he had not loosened the water net that had captured the creature. How did the individual escape? Yun Yanli looked around, but could not see anyone. All he could see were the waves. How did the creature get away so quickly? He cursed to vent his anger. "Damn it! You ladyboy!" The stranger with a beautiful face turned out to be a man, leaving Yun Yanli puzzled. He stood there and put an evil smile on his face. Not even the roaring waves could stop his search. Nothing would stop him. With the powers of a great deity, he would still possess good control even in the water. The sea was no obstacle to him at all. He lunged into the water at full speed and went right into the depths of the sea. As he was getting deeper into the ocean, he recalled a conversation that he had with Gu Shizhou many years ago about a crystal palace that was hidden beneath the sea. Every time she was troubled, she would spend her time in the palace to contemplate her next move. That was when he realized that she was actually a good swimmer. Hence, it was likely that she would have brought Di Fui somewhere deep in the ocean to keep him safe. Perhaps, there was a crystal palace within the depths of the water here in the Shura world as well. Furthermore, the blood rain was about to pour, so Gu Shizhou definitely needed to find a safe place to hide. There were only two places that she could seek shelter from the rain, the ocean or Lagua City. These were the only two places that were within their reach before dusk. Since the creature that he was going after was a member of the sea, he had more reasons to believe that Gu Shijiu and Di Fui were indeed hiding in the water. Furthermore, Lagua City was under the complete control of Yun Yanli, hence, the sea was obviously a safer option. At full speed, Yun Yanli traveled just like a missile. Soon, he found a trace of the squid man from before. Most tracking spells would fail in the water, as all of the targets sent would be hidden. However, the tracking spell that Yun Yanli used would target one's soul. Therefore, even though the squid man was already in the water, Yun Yanli was still able to track him down. The squid man had tricked him far too many times for his liking, so he could barely contain his frustration any longer. He was eager to capture the creature again and find the crystal palace where Gu Shijiu and Di Fui would be hiding. It would be best if he could round up the whole lot at once. Very soon, Yun Yanli was already at the bottom of the sea. Yun Yanli studied the area but did not find any hideout. There were only some corals, seaweed, green algae, and all kinds of fishes and sea creatures. Without the crystal palace to provide them with refuge, Gu Shijiu and Di Fui couldn't stay underwater for an extended period. Disappointed, he started to doubt his thoughts. Could it be that Gu Shijiu and Di Fui were never here? Had they gone to Lagua City instead? Perhaps, the squid man was just a distraction. It would appear that he fell for another trick. Yun Yanli clenched his fists tightly in frustration. He had fought along with Gu Shijiu before, and the two of them had overcome many obstacles together, so he thought that he knew her style quite well. Gu Shijiu had once told him that the most dangerous place would often turn out to be the safest. Hence, they could be hiding in his residence back in Lagua City. The sudden thought made Yun Yanli very anxious. He could no longer care about the squid man and wanted to return to Lagua City as soon as possible. However, in the distance, he noticed some movements in the water, as if something swimming by him. Even though he was initially puzzled, the answer came to him very quickly when he caught the scent of the squid man. Therefore, he had a change of plan. It would take him at least 4 hours to return to Lagua City, and there was a chance that he would find nothing there. Nonetheless, if the squid man was one of Di Fui's trusted men, he could capture him and use him as a bait to drive Gu Shijiu and Di Fui out of hiding. That way, he would have leverage on them rather than blindly chasing them around the place. Yun Yanli quickly surveyed the area as he knew that the squid man was nearby. He knew that the man was swimming in different directions around him just to get him confused. Perhaps, the man was using some invisibility spell. This made Yun Yanli annoyed, and he could no longer suppress his urge to kill the creature. "Find your way through," he called out while casting a spell. All of a sudden, a streak of bright light surrounded Yun Yanli's body and broke away in a violent expansion, transmitting energy outwards like a massive shockwave. Through the waves, the man could finally be seen. This time, he was wearing another set of dark blue robes, which shared the same color as the sea. Obviously injured, he shed some blood as soon as the waves brushed him through. "Damn it, lady boy. There is no way you can escape this time." His lips curved upward at its edges as a self-satisfied smirk appeared on Yun Yanli's face. At that very moment, he started launching deadly attacks at the squid man that only a great deity was capable of performing. The man noticed that things were taking a quick, dangerous turn, so he wanted to escape. A swift turn had caused him to run into an ice wall that blocked his way. Caught in a daze, he was still determined not to engage. He turned to another direction and soon realized that the surrounding water was quickly turning into ice. Soon, he was unable to move. "How dare you challenge me, you insignificant squid monster? What an overconfident creature." Yun Yanli stood before the big ice cube and looked at the squid monster with an egotistic smile. The man was not able to move but was still conscious. "How blind!" he called out. Yun Yanli did not quite understand the man's reply. However, he could see that the man continued to wink his eyes charmingly. Soon, his long, thick lashes brushed across the surface of the ice. Have you ever seen a squid monster with my unparalleled beauty? What are you then? The man smiled as he said, guess. As attractive as a blossoming flower, his smiling face was the only thing that was worth paying attention to in the sea of plain, dull water. His eyes glistened along with his smile, which looked like stars in the night sky. The man was trying to use the bewitching spell to make Yun Yanli get rid of the ice cube. Only members of his species knew how to utilize this spell. Yun Yanli smiled at him and added softly, I hate guessing. If you refuse to tell me, I shall end your life right here. Chapter 2460, The Inducement. Yun Yanli launched a strike at the big ice cube. The attack did not break the ice but somehow managed to hurt the man inside the ice cube. The attack severely hurt the victim, and the complexion on his face slowly faded away. He could not help but spit out a few mouthfuls of blood. His blood had stained almost every corner of the ice on the inside. Shocked, Yun Yanli finally noticed that the man's body was slowly melting away. Could he be a jellyfish? Once a jellyfish dies, it would just melt away in the water. Yun Yanli had fallen for a few of the man's trick, so he dared not make another move just yet. He tried to read the man's pulse by placing his hand on the surface of the ice. To his dismay, he found out that the man was slowly losing signs of life. The realization surprised Yun Yanli, as he did not want the creature to die right away. If the creature died, he would lose his leverage against Di Fui and Gu Shijiu. Hence, he quickly performed a spell to melt the ice away and was shocked to realize that the creature's body no longer had any colors. As soon as the ice disappeared, the man collapsed to the bottom of the sea, seemingly lifeless. Strangely, even the blue robes that he was wearing turned white. Meanwhile, the look on his face slowly turned pale as he swayed along with the current lifelessly. Yun Yanli could not watch him die. He stuffed a pill into the man's mouth that could help him recover. In order to prevent the man from playing any tricks, he put his hand around the man's weakest point, while feeding the pill to him. In case of an unexpected event, he would launch another strike at the man. After he fed him with the pill, the man still remained lifeless. Yun Yanli suspected that the man had died since there was no pulse present. Also, the man did not swallow the pill. It remained in his mouth. Was the man dead? Could he really be so fragile? Yun Yanli was aware that he had launched a deadly strike. Even a golden immortal would be greatly severely wounded, so this junior immortal would certainly have felt its effects. The man did not possess a high degree of spiritual power. All he had were some weird, surprising moves. Moreover, Yun Yanli had yet to figure out the man's species. Perhaps, he was a fragile creature. Having regretted his actions, Yun Yanli lowered his body in an attempt to check if the man was breathing. With his other hand, he placed his palm on the man's chest while trying to channel some spiritual power to keep him alive. What happened next was completely out of Yun Yanli's expectations. If he could choose again, he would let the creature die. However, there was no way to turn back time. Yun Yanli had to admit that he had fallen for another trick. The seemingly lifeless man bounced back to life as soon as Yun Yanli touched his chest. The man's small, delicate mouth opened up widely and fiercely as he took a quick bite of Yun Yanli's hand. Yun Yanli's spiritual power was usually strong enough to keep his skin protected from attacks, but to his surprise, the man's protruding, canine teeth managed to punch 2 holes through his skin. Out of anger, Yun Yanli launched a strike that hit the man's chest. He was sent across the water. As the creature's teeth were still sunk into Yun Yanli's skin when he was pushed across the water, it made the wound worse and caused blood to ooze out of his hand, staining the surrounding water burgundy. Yun Yanli found himself poisoned, and the pain was 10 times greater than any form of external cut that Yun Yanli had ever suffered. He could not help but shiver in cold sweats. Thinking on his feet, he quickly used his spiritual power to drive out the toxins in his body. Meanwhile, he quickly tried to spot the squid man. The man was severely wounded by the strike and lay floating in the water. He seemed to be coughing uncontrollably. The creature intended to run but fell right into the trap that Yun Yanli had prepared for him. The creature found itself caught in a tight net, which left him with no space to even shift his body. It decided to stop struggling. Yun Yanli, were you a fisherman in your previous life? Where did you learn to make so many nets? Yun Yanli ignored him completely. He only focused on driving the toxins out of his body. He had brought many pills with him, and some of which were really effective antitoxins. Although he consumed the appropriate pills shortly after being poisoned, the wound was still excruciating. Hence, he continued to squeeze the purple blood out of his hand until he saw that his blood was finally cleansed. The blood returned to its usual red tone. He then dressed the wound before dragging the net to the surface of the water. The man looked delicate but was unusually heavy. After swimming for a while, Yun Yanli's arms started to turn sore. In fact, he suffered from minor blackouts due to exhaustion. Carrying the man to the surface was as if dragging a mountain. It was unusually tiring. How could the man be so heavy? Yun Yanli threw a quick glance at the man and saw him resting with his eyes closed. His face was still as pale as a sheet. He stayed completely still like a lifeless statue. Perhaps, the man was playing dead again. Yun Yanli would not fall for another trap. If the man was dead, he could always hang his body at the top of the city gate to lure Gu Shijiu into his trap. Tired, Yun Yanli did not want to think about the man anymore. He had spent a great amount of time underwater, and his chest was starting to hurt. He had to return to the surface as soon as possible. He needed to get his men to search Legua City as quickly as possible. After swimming for a while more, he realized that something was not quite right. His vision slowly darkened, and he could barely feel his legs. He wanted to speed up but was halted by a sudden change in his body. He quickly looked around and was shocked by what he found. Many pitch-black sharks emerged close by. There were at least a dozen sharks, and each of them was twice the size of a normal shark. The sharks were all equipped with many teeth that were as sharp as swords. As soon as he noticed them, they started attacking. Even in his current state, Yun Yanli still believed that he could take them down. He raised his hand, and an emerald sword immediately appeared on his palm. As soon as the sword appeared, it was accompanied by a brief, high-pitched but ghostly sound that was quite uneasy to bear. He knew that the sharks would do nothing to him once they heard the sounds. He would fight the sharks and make it clear to them that he was not someone that they should be messing with. About an hour later, all the sharks were floating lifelessly on the surface of the sea. All of their stomachs were slashed open, staining the sea with a large pool of blood. Meanwhile, Yun Yanli floated effortlessly to the surface of the water, while trying to catch his breath. The fight for survival had drained all of his energy, but now that all the sharks were dead, he could finally have a moment to rest. Blood was pouring from the sky, eroding the bodies of the dead sharks and turning them into skeletons. Oddly enough, Yun Yanli's body was not affected at all by the blood rain. The bloody bats were not interested in him, as well. They rushed from the sky and went towards the sharks to feed on the barely remaining flesh. Yun Yanli's spell of blackout started to increase in frequency. It was easy to take down one or two sharks with his sword, but killing off the entire group proved overwhelming. The number of sharks attacking him seemed endless as they kept charging at him one after another. Soon, he figured that the blood of the dead sharks must have attracted more sharks his way. Therefore, after a while, he decided to retreat. Nonetheless, he swam right into the path of another group of sharks. The sharks were actually here to devour him. Groups of sharks kept coming fiercely and fearlessly, thus giving Yun Yanli an utterly difficult time. He was starting to get really tired from the never-ending battle. In the very end, desperate times called for desperate measures. He swam desperately to the surface of the water. The sharks were afraid of the blood rain, so none of them cared to attack him anymore. That was how he escaped. Were the sharks going after him? Or were they trying to save the man who was trapped in the net? Yun Yanli took a look at the man and saw that he was wide awake. However, he laid quietly in the net while staring intensely at Yun Yanli. "Are you their leader?" Yun Yanli had to know. With a smile, the man answered with another question, "Do you really think that I will answer you?" Badly wounded, the the man was clearly in a mess. Nevertheless, even in times of danger, he still spoke in circles around Yun Yanli, never quite revealing the truth. Besides that, he always gave Yun Yanli a carefree smile, as if nothing really mattered to him. Unamused, Yun Yanli decided to stop asking questions. He gave the man another look and was actually quite impressed by his determination. The squid man remained strong despite all the torments that he had put him through. What kind of species was he? How did Di Fui manage to find such a capable man? Yun Yanli wished he had the same talent in his army. He was an ambitious man with a wild vision. When he spotted a great talent, he would definitely try and convince the man to join him in achieving great things together. Did Di Fui send you here to distract me? The man winked at him again but did not say anything. Stop beating about the bush. Get straight to the point. Di Fui knows how strong I am, so he must be aware that you are no match for me, and yet he chose to send you here. He was basically sending you straight into your grave. I noticed that you have great talents, so are you really satisfied with the way he used you? The man looked a little depressed. Who cares if I am not satisfied? He is the Devil King. As a follower, loyalty is the ultimate rule that one must comply with. He ended the sentence in a rather miserable tone. Yun Yanli felt hopeful. The Devil King. Do you know where he came from? Yun Yanli gave him a smirk. The man blinked his eyes in curiosity. Where did he come from? He is the son of the celestial being and devil from heaven. He is not really part of the devil clan. He only went into the devil kingdom to hide from me. Preoccupied, the man murmured, I know that he is the son of the divine lord, but the devil blood still runs in his vein. He worked for the devil and turned the once chaotic devil kingdom into the orderly and peaceful world that we now live in. Indeed, he has the blood of the devil, but he is also a member of the celestial world, where the ultimate goal is to destroy all devils in favor of their own power. Do you know how many devils were killed by him? The man did not answer. What do you think about my kung fu, as compared to Di Fui's? Yun Yanli continued. You are slightly stronger, the man said, hesitantly. Yun Yanli was satisfied with the reply. In fact, his kung fu was far superior to Di Fui's. Now that you are trapped in my hands, do you think that Di Fui would risk his life to save yours? I am merely one of his followers. The man sounded quite sad. Only true soldiers would willingly die for their king. Never had it been another way round, where the king would sacrifice his life for his men. Yun Yanli gazed at him intently. Do you want to live or die? To live, of course. The man did not hesitate as he answered. There is only one way you will survive. Pledge your loyalty to me and join my forces. A clever man should know what his best option is. If you are willing to work for me, I shall spare your life and give you the chance to do great things. In the Shura world, no one is more powerful than me. Once I unify the entire Shura world, I will appoint you as the ruler of the continent, if you work well. By that time, you can do whatever you please. The man shook his head in disapproval. Your offer does not sound quite right to me. If I were to become the new king of the Shura world, what would you do? After all the hassle that you have gone through, would you choose to walk away and travel the world like a free man? Of course not. My goal is not to rule the Shura world. I want to be back in heaven and be the new emperor there. What do you think about my offer? I will only offer it once. Don't blame me for missing the chance. If you pass, I will torture you severely and hang your body at the city gate to warn others against committing a similar crime. The squid man's options were clear. One path would lead the man straight to his death. The other would possibly guide him down a luxurious, successful path. Hence, Yun Yanli was confident that the man would take his offer. After all, devils were born to be sly and greedy. Di Fui had only been the Devil King for 6 months. How loyal could the man be after 6 months of service? With enough interest, he believed that he could make the man change his mind. The man was not a fool, and Yun Yanli could see how smart and cunning he could be. He was definitely the kind of man who was easily lured by personal gains. When Yun Yanli was done listing out his terms, he kept quiet while waiting for the man to make a decision. The man did not say anything for the next 5 minutes. He then broke his silence when he smilingly said, "You are only offering me the chance because you need to know the location of the Devil King and Miss Gu. I will not deny it, but I also appreciate your talents. Would you believe me even if I told you?" "Try me," Yun Yanli said briefly. "They are at the bottom of the sea." "Nonsense. There is no refuge there. With their current abilities, they will not be able to survive that long underwater." "Silly. The Devil King can always activate a wizardry barrier to keep the water out. The wizardry barrier could also shield him from being visible to others." Yun Yanli was convinced that it could be a possibility. "Do you know where they set up the wizardry barrier?" "I have no idea about the exact location, but I do know roughly where they are located. If you search for them carefully, you should be able to find them." There was a complicated look in Yun Yanli's eyes that made it difficult for the squid man to understand his true intention. "As I said, you would not believe me even if I told you," the man dismissed himself with a wave. Yun Yanli studied the man intently as if trying to see beyond his skin. The man did not even try to avoid Yun Yanli's intense gaze. He seemed to have nothing to hide. "What is your name? What species are you?" Yun Yanli asked some irrelevant questions. "Kun Yunjan. I am a dragon," the man answered accordingly. Yun Yanli had never expected that the man would turn out to be a dragon. He finally understood why the man was so talented. Yun Yanli said nothing more. He proceeded to take out his directed audio spell and sent some orders to his men, "Go to Lagua City and search the entire place." He then continued to describe the physical appearances of Di Fui and Gu Shijiu to help his men with their search. Kun Yunjan listened to the command with a smile. He knew that Yun Yanli would not take any risks and would search both places inside out. Soon, Yun Yanli ended the directed audio spell and was ready to dive into the water again, along with the net. "You are coming with me. If we find them, this will be your first achievement." In the end, Yun Yanli had spent the entire night searching for his two prey, but the result was fruitless. There was not even the slightest trace of their presence. Kun Yunjan appeared to be on Yun Yanli's side as he rummaged through the entire ocean with the man. Over time, Yun Yanli continued to grow more frustrated. Hastily, he activated a tracking spell at the bottom of the ocean and found a trace of Gu Zijia's breath. The man was thrilled and immediately began to follow the tracker. In the end, he seemed to be chasing after a squid. He was almost caught by the 8 long claws of the squid. The squid had mistakenly regarded him as a big fish and was ready to devour the man. However, Yun Yanli broke away from the 8 big arms of the squid and used his sword to split the creature into 2 halves. Having cut the creature into 2, Yun Yanli found an item that belonged to Gu Shijiu. It was a purse. Inside the purse, there was a human-shaped paper doll. Once he took it out from the purse, the paper doll immediately melted away in the water. Yun Yanli had been distracted for a long time in the ocean as he was trying to find his 2 targets. In the end, he finally understood that Kun Yunjan had fooled him. He glared at the dragon creature murderously. Kun Yunjan was still trapped in the net, so there was no way for him to escape. He probably understood that he could no longer continue fooling the man anymore. Hence, he smiled gracefully and winked, "Why are you looking at me? I feel so embarrassed when you stare at me this way. Do you like me? If you like me, you can be upfront about it." Yun Yanli answered with his palm as it smashed right into the man's face. "Stupid lady boy. I will make you suffer a fate worse than death." Yun Yanli sounded like the devil now. Kun Yunzan's face was pale, and he spat out blood from his mouth again. Nonetheless, he still wanted to tease Yun Yanli despite his situation, so he laughed while coughing, "Let me tell you the truth. My skin is thick and rough. I am not sensitive to pain. There are very few punishments in this world that can make my life feel worse than death. If you really hate me, you just have to do one thing. If you do it right, I would rather die than stay alive. Yun Yanli would no longer believe a word that came out from his mouth. He bit his lips and smiled coldly. Is that so? The palm of his hand was like a knife, and he cut one of Kun Yunzhen's wrists off. Even though he should have been in excruciating pain, the man did not even blink. Instead, he sighed. Why do you hate my hand so much? You seem to have cut it off twice. After that, Yun Yanli watched as a new hand grew on his wrist. Yun Yanli was speechless. Was this guy really a dragon? His regenerative power seemed to resemble that of an octopus. An idea came to his mind to cut off Kun Yunzhen's head to see if a new one would grow on top of it. Kun Yunzhen looked at his angry yet handsome face and sighed. To be honest, I have only one head. Once you cut it, I will die, and your plan of giving me a life worse than death will fail. Therefore, if you want me to suffer, there is only one way. Do you want to hear it? Yun Yanli was holding onto his sword so tightly that his fingertips started to turn white. He asked coldly, what method is that? Kun Yunzhen looked at him lovingly and replied, it is said that a hero always dies for beauty. You have a good outlook, and I like it very much. Do you want to consider seducing and sleeping with me for a few nights? Perhaps, I will fall in love with you. If that happens, you will make it difficult for me to choose between love and justice. And if that moment were to come, I would rather die. Yun Yanli was furious. For the first time in his life, he felt like slicing a person's heart into pieces. Yet, he could not do so because this man could lead him to Di Fui. In desperation, Yun Yanli did not wait for Kun Yunzhen to utter another word. Instead, he knocked the man out cold. Where did Di Fui find this annoying creature with the ability to change his appearance at will? Perhaps, it was true that birds of a feather flock together. Di Fui was equally skilled and annoying. Chapter 2465, did not miss a single inch. The sky was bright and sunny again as the blood rain had already come to an end this time. Yun Yanli had wasted his whole night here with Kun Yunzhen. He contacted his subordinates and asked for an update on their search in Legua City. They had turned the entire Legua City upside down but still could not find the people that their master wanted. Have all the places been searched? Are you sure that you did not miss a single inch? Yun Yanli pushed his people. The young palace master who was in charge of the matter was slightly stunned. The only place that has not been searched in your bedroom. The expression on Yun Yanli's face suddenly turned serious. I had asked you to search every inch of the land, right? The most crucial place is my bedroom. Master, I have looked around your bedroom, and I did not find anything unusual, so I left. The only place I did not search was the underground palace, as I do not have the permission to enter the place. Yun Yanli remained silent. Gu Shijiu was indeed hiding from the rain in Legua City. Earlier in the carriage, she knew that Yun Yanli would tail them and that the incident would not end well for her. It was only a matter of time before Yun Yanli took action. Therefore, she and Di Fui had a discussion. They asked Di Fui's subordinate to talk to Di Fui as if they were still in the carriage. At that time, she and Di Fui had already teleported away. She left Di Fui in a relatively safe place and went back into the carriage again. She then asked the subordinate to change into her appearance and settle matters with Yun Yanli. Meanwhile, she teleported Guardian Jean and Guardian Hua out of the carriage. After all, Gu Shijiu had been friends with Yun Yanli for some time. She knew his style of working and remembered how good he was at tracking people down. Due to this, she had developed a set of counter-tracking techniques in the event that she needed to keep herself away from the man. She used the cloud leopard to hide the traces of her breath fro Yun Yanli, but this technique required the cooperation of the cloud leopard, which she had captured. Fortunately, Di Fui also knew a technique that hides the essence of people's souls into a paper doll. This method was much more convenient for the time being, so the two of them made a dozen paper dolls and gave them to Guardian Jean, Guardian Hua, and Guardian Kun. After Gu Shijiu rescued Guardian Jean and Guardian Hua, the two men caught a couple of wild beasts and hid Di Fui's and Gu Zijia's breaths onto them. Everything had to be done swiftly as no one knew how quickly Di Fui's condition would deteriorate. Gu Shijiu had sent Di Fui to Legua City. Di Fui requested that they hid in Yun Yanli's residence. After all, once Yun Yanli found out something was not right, he would surely send all his people to search the entire city. By convention, the only place that would not be searched was Yun Yanli's residence. However, Gu Shijiu disagreed with his plan. Knowing Yun Yanli better, she guessed that the first place he would ask his people to search was his residence. Therefore, it would not be a safe place to hide. Gu Shijiu was spot on as Yun Yanli's subordinates searched his residence first. It was only after they had done a thorough search that they decided to explore the other areas of the city. Before the search commenced, Gu Shijiu and the two guardians had snuck into Yun Yanli's residence and caught 4 people. They bombarded them with critical questions to understand the situation and then killed them right away. Then, all of them disguised as the 4 people who were killed and walked into the house through the front door without being caught. Chapter 2466, The young palace master did not recognize her. Yun Yanli's subordinates did not possess the same tracking abilities that he did. They certainly could not track the breaths of each person in the city, so they couldn't know that the guards in residence had been replaced. When the young palace master, Ming Dai, received the instructions from Yun Yanli to search his house, Gu Shijiu and the gang had already familiarized themselves with the place. Fortunately for her, she had met the young palace master before, so she could certainly recognize her. But of course, the young palace master did not recognize Gu Shijiu. During the search, Di Fui's body was expected to undergo some serious changes. However, it appeared that he had made a mistake somewhere as he turned out to be fine even after the search was over. Gu Shijiu was rather ecstatic by that fact. Upon checking his pulse, she found that he was even more powerful than before. It crossed her mind that the purple cloud mushroom's spiritual power must have come from Di Fui. Perhaps all it needed was to acclimatize itself with Di Fui's current spiritual energy to stabilize itself. Unfortunately, her prediction was incorrect as it was only a matter of time before Di Fui's body started to undergo some changes. It seemed to stir with an unprecedented amount of force. Fortunately for the 4 of them, the young palace master did not suspect anything wrong with the guards at the residence, so they were left alone. While thinking of a solution, Gu Shijiu finally recalled the key to Yun Yanli's ability to absorb the spiritual power in the Shura world. He had used the starry array to do so. She once looked around the starry array in Sueya City. However, the internal mechanism was too complicated, and opening the mechanism required a spiritual power above level 9. She did not reach it at the time, so she could not open it. Even though she did not manage to understand the mechanism, she certainly remembered its location. She told Di Fui about the starry array, informing him that each city had its own starry array, and they were the source of power to support the wizardry barrier against the blood rain. Di Fui asked her about the layout and orientation of the starry array in detail. Then, he began to speculate on the possible location of the starry array in Legua City. He predicted that the array must be in Yun Yanli's own residence. Gu Shijiu was somewhat puzzled by this hypothesis as the starry array in Sueya City was in a bamboo forest, somewhere in the outskirts of the city. It was even hidden inside a temple. So how could the starry array in Legua City rest in the house of the city's owner? Di Fui was not bothered with her objection and explained the specific composition of the starry array. It turned out that the orientation of the underground starry array of each city was different, even though they were somehow arranged according to a pattern. For example, the one in Sueya City was located at the northernmost point of the Shura world, so it was also in the northern part of the city. Meanwhile, Legua City was in the center of the Shura world, so its starry array should be in the center of the city. Gu Shijiu remained dubious, so Di Fui wanted to convince her. To verify his theory, Di Fui asked Guardian Jin and Guardian Hua to guard the residence. He then took Gu Shijiu into Yun Yanli's bedroom. Guards were usually strictly forbidden from entering into Yun Yanli's bedroom. Besides Yun Yanli, the only person who could enter the place was the young palace master. Although there were alarm systems set in place, the 2 of them managed to maneuver their way through without setting any of them off. In the process, they noticed that Yun Yanli's bedroom was immaculate and neat. It was very unlike the one in Sueye City, which was occupied by a bunch of concubines who were vital in opening the mechanism. Contrastingly, there was no one in sight over here. Gu Shijiu quickly ransacked the bedroom but did not see any underground passage to the starry array. Meanwhile, Di Fui sat at the table and started to write and draw. When Gu Shijiu finally went back to him, she found that he had drawn a very complicated astrological map on a piece of paper. The map was dotted with stars all over, and it made Gu Shijiu feel a little dizzy. Gu Shijiu was also an expert in astrology. However, she was confused by the map that Di Fui had drawn out. She felt like a middle school student who was reading through a university-level textbook. She pulled his sleeve and asked, "I thought you said that the starry array is in this palace. Where can we find it?" Di Fui looked around and pinched with his fingers together as if casting a spell. After a while, he pointed at the tile in the center of the room and said, "If I am not mistaken, the starry array is below this tile. However, it can only be broken using a star-breaking technique." Gu Shijiu looked at him doubtfully. The term that he used was foreign to her. What is a star-breaking technique? She had never heard of it. Di Fui pinched his fingers together again and said, "Watch me do it first, I will teach you later." All of a sudden, a colorful array of lights emerged from his fingertips and gradually developed into the shape of a pagoda. The pagoda then slammed into the floor tiles as if to smash them. Upon collision, one could tell that there was something invisible on the floor tiles that were broken by the pagoda. An entrance to a tunnel could then be seen. Inside the tunnel, some staircases wriggled downward. Apparently, the starry array was here. Gu Shijiu looked at Di Fui and gave him a thumbs up. You can actually crack such a complex astrological map. It seems that what you have learned is really extraordinary. Did you learn this from the Divine Lord? Di Fui was stunned, and his eyes flashed slightly. If I told you that I was born with this knowledge, would you believe it? Definitely not. There were many things that one could learn by observing or with the help of a teacher, but the astrological map must be taught by a master, especially one as complicated as the one that Di Fui had drawn. Di Fuius was disappointed by her response. After all, he did not learn about this astrological map from his father. It was suddenly just generated in his mind. It seemed that he understood it a few years ago and was now just trying to recall it. Had he somehow retrieved part of his memory as Huang Tu? He tried to access more information from his brain, but his mind was empty. He could not remember anything else. Di Fui was too lazy to think more deeply about this matter, so he pulled Gu Shijiu along with him and walked down the stairs. Let's go in. The stairs were made with jade, and the two of them followed the steps down into the hidden passage. What they had found was that the pathway inside the place was as dense as a spider's web. It led to all directions. Gu Shijiu directly looked at Di Fui and asked, "Which way should we go?" Di Fui stood there for a moment to ponder, and then took her to a path. Here. The route was really smooth, and they did not trigger any mechanisms along the way. We have to move faster. Yun Yanli might be back very soon. Gu Shijiu was still uneasy. Di Fui laughed. Rest assured, he is with Kun Shui. He won't be back before dawn. Ah, so his name is Kun Shui. This name is perfect for him, as he is such a talented person. However, I believe you should know that Yun Yanli is not someone who can be easily fooled. Kun Shui may not be able to hold him for long. Chapter 2468, Don't be fooled by his appearance. In all honesty, Kun Shui is not my subordinate. He is a friend. In the past, he and a close friend of his had violated the rules in the Devil Kingdom. I personally went to apprehend him. Kun Shui once held me back for nearly an hour. Believe me, with Kun Zuyu's perverted means, Yun Yanli will be going nowhere. I can get away from him within 5 hours. He is considered very capable. He is undoubtedly powerful then. Gu Shijiu said with a sigh. Someone who could hold Di Fui for nearly an hour must not be someone ordinary. Di Fui pulled her into his arms and continued, I am the most powerful, though. Do not boast about other men to me. It appeared that Di Fui was rather jealous of other men. Instead of being annoyed, Gu Shijiu actually liked it. Yes, you are the best. Gu Shijiu entertained him. She turned back and pinched his face. My Fui is the best. No one can compete with you. Even though that was what Di Fui wanted to hear, the manner in which it was done made him feel as though Gu Shijiu was coaxing a child. Having his face pinched certainly added to that feeling. After that, Di Fui held her hand and did not let her do it again. Gu Shijiu then recalled the moment when she was making the necessary arrangements with Di Fui while they were in the carriage. Kun Shui stood there with the appearance of Shinjiuli, listening very gracefully and only speaking when necessary. When Di Fui asked him to do something, he would always respond very quickly. However, when Di Fui asked him to impersonate Gu Shijiu as a way to confuse Yun Yanli, he refused to do it. He told Di Fui that he could hold the opponent for more than 5 hours, but he could not go to Legua City and meet them afterward. He wanted to return to Luo Shaxi. Earlier, when the young palace master received the news from Yun Yanli, Gu Shijiu was not too far away and could hear the conversation. Although Yun Yanli did not say where he was, it was apparent that he was not coming back anytime soon. That was proof that Kun Shui succeeded in holding him up. Even though Gu Shijiu was relieved, she still had some concerns about the man's safety. After all, Yun Yanli was extraordinarily powerful. Kun Shui might not be able to cope with him if the two were to get into an intense battle. Don't worry, Kun Zui's original body is that of a Kun. He can transform into thousands of different forms. Even Yun Yanli would struggle to get him. Di Fui gave her reassurance. A Kun Peng had wings that were 9,000 miles wide. A Kun is a mythological beast. In the sea, it was a Kun. However, on land, it was a golden-winged giant Peng. It could transform into any shape. It could even transform into something as huge as a mountain or as tiny as a speck of dust. Gu Shijiu had only heard about it but had never seen it before. She did not expect Di Fui to have such a capable ally. Regardless of how powerful Yun Yanli was, he could not catch a molecule in the water. No wonder his stealth technique was so good. He was not invisible but just made himself become infinitely small so that people could not even see him. If Kun Shui really wanted to escape, Yun Yanli might not be able to catch him at all. Hence, Gu Shijiu let out a sigh of relief. Di Fui took her hand and said, "You will need to stay far away from Kun Shui." Ah. Why? This person is very flirty. Flirty? It is just his character. He likes to play with girls. You need to stay far away from him. Gu Shijiu carefully recalled the appearance of Kun Shui. I think he is cool. When you ordered him to work, he did not even question you and always took your commands very seriously. Di Fui raised his hand and touched her hair. Don't be fooled by his appearance. Chapter 2469, he was so knowledgeable. The guy was sly and very slick about it. He saw that Gu Shijiu was Di Fui's prized possession, so he naturally acted like an ordinary loyal subordinate to try to subdue his existence so as not to provoke Di Fui accidentally. Meanwhile, Di Fui continued to caress her face. Gu Shijiu enjoyed his pampering but also felt somewhat awkward. Even though she was a lot older than Di Fui, he seemed to always want to treat her like a little girl. Fortunately, Di Fui did appear to be older than her, so it would not prove to be an issue to third parties. She grabbed his hand and patted him with her other hand. Prince Nianma, behave yourself. Don't simply touch me inappropriately in public. She patted him like a puppy, and Di Fui could not help but pull her into his embrace and kiss her aggressively. It was only when they started to feel a little tired that he let her go. I didn't touch you. I kissed you. Gu Shijiu pushed him away and remarked, "You are too naughty." While they were talking, the two of them had entered into the depths of the cave and came to a big hall. The vivid imagery brought flashbacks to Gu Shijiu as the layout here was precisely the same as the underground labyrinth in Sueya City. There were also shelves with different colored crystals displayed on it. There were many crystals there, perhaps as many as the stars. Gu Shijiu was excited to see the spiritual crystal and wanted to collect them all. However, she still had a lot of things in her storage space, so there was only a limited amount that she could take with her. She tugged on Di Fui's sleeve and said, "Your storage space is ample enough. Let's take all these spiritual crystals. The crystals are helping Yun Yanli with his evil plans. Perhaps after they are destroyed, the Shura world will return to normal." Di Fui had a look around the hall and frowned. Something is not right. He grasped Gu Zijia's small hand that was just about to take the biggest crystal. Slowly, "These spiritual crystals are weird." Gu Shijiu was stunned and withdrew her hand. She studied the spiritual crystal carefully but could not see any difference. How is it weird? Something is not quite right about their aura. He waved his sleeve at the biggest spiritual crystal and noticed that there was a black gas on the crystal. The black gas was like a little devil. When it appeared, it even opened its mouth. Gu Shijiu saw that it was going to scream, so she quickly cast a spell at it. The little devil seemed to have gone mute momentarily. Di Fui also cast a spell on it, and a colorful light wrapped itself around the little devil. Following a loud sound, the little devil appeared to have been knocked out. "Why don't you kill it?" Gu Shijiu could see that this little devil was extremely fierce. It had probably killed before. "We can't kill it now." Di Fui continued, "It serves as an alarm. Whether it screams or is killed, it will alert the people outside. Therefore, it is best for us to knock it out." Admirably, Gu Shijiu stared at Di Fui in awe. He was very knowledgeable. "Silly. Did you think that my title as Devil King is fake?" He put his fingers together again and shot light at different spiritual crystals in the hall. When the colorful lights passed over the crystals, little demons had emerged as well, and he immediately knocked them out. In just a brief moment, he knocked out more than 20 little devils. The little devils were guarding various types of spiritual crystals, which made it difficult for any imposters to find a pattern. If any outside were to touch the wrong crystal accidentally, they would probably find themselves badly hurt. Chapter 2470. He had been shy before. Even if Gu Shijiu and Di Fui's abilities could prevent the little devils from hurting them, once an alarm was sounded, Yun Yanli's subordinates would enter into his lair, and they would not be able to hide anymore. Hence, it was necessary to subdue them. After he was done with the little devils, Di Fui started to store the unaffected spiritual crystals into his own storage space and left the guarded crystals untouched so as not to alarm anyone. Meanwhile, Gu Shijiu had already found a secret door for them to continue moving forward. To open this door, one had to possess at least a level 9 spiritual power. In the past, Gu Shijiu was unable to open the door. But this time, she could. She opened the secret door in just a few seconds and found a pathway made with jade behind the door. This jade could absorb all the light in the area, so when the door was opened, the hallway looked completely dark. There seemed to be a draft of cold wind circulating inside the hallway. Even though the wind was not strong, the cold wind seemed to get straight into the bones. Gu Shijiu shivered, and the hair on her back was standing in unison. Di Fui pulled her behind him and said, "Don't rush, follow me." He raised his hand and created a small wizardry barrier around her body. The barrier was able to shield her from the cold wind. This man really treated her like a prized porcelain doll. Gu Shijiu looked at his broad shoulders and muscular figure from the back and was impressed. However, she also found it somewhat weird. It was just a gust of wind. He was really overreacting. Did he really think that she was so weak? Nonetheless, it felt so good to be protected by her sweetheart. Gu Shijiu put her face on his back and embraced his waist with her arms. "Fui, I really love you." Di Fui was stunned for a moment. After a brief pause, he simply nodded in response. It was completely out of her expectations to see him acknowledge her sweet words so nonchalantly. The man was so playful, and she definitely expected him to respond sweetly. Did he not like her to be so open about her feelings? The lady was not very open about her feelings, but she could feel how much Di Fui cared for her. Nonetheless, the awkward response made her regret her action. She wanted to pull her hands away from his waist, but he held her wrists and did not let go. Although the entire place was dark, Gu Zijia's abilities allowed her to see everything clearly. She saw that Di Fuya's ears were slightly reddish. She also realized that the palms that were holding her hands were very hot. It was as if an iron was on her hands. Was this guy embarrassed? He had been shy before. With that note, Gu Shizhou could not help but smile. She was not a very expressive person, but when she was with him, she was always inexplicably happy. If she were not worried about the abrupt changes that were expected to hit him, she would have been even happier. How do you feel? Gu Shizhou asked softly. Very good. Di Fui whispered to her. Stupid. I want to know about your condition. Do you feel any pain? Not yet. Gu Shizhou breathed a sigh of relief. Perhaps, the poison has been digested by your body and will not erupt any further. After all, if I am not mistaken, the purple cloud mushroom is the spiritual power from your past life. Maybe. Di Fui felt a gentle warmth in his body the entire time he was with Gu Shizhou. It felt just like a breeze in the spring. Everything was going well for him. Even the wound he suffered before from extracting blood directly from the heart was now healed. No scars were left from the injury. In stark contrast, the wind in the passage was freezing cold. As Di Fui stayed in front, he shielded the wind from Gu Shizhou but understood why there were no traps along the pathway. This wind itself would have been able to keep away a significant number of people. The reasons why Di Fui could stand the cold were due to his unique physique and high spiritual power relative to the other people in the Shura world. In order to ensure that Gu Shizhou was really protected, he had even placed a wizardry barrier over her body that could diminish the effects of the wind. Curious about the nature of the cold wind, Di Fui inhaled a deep breath and frowned. The wind seemed to be the yin aura of the place, and it was certainly powerful. Then, he was trying to guess what could be waiting for them at the end of the path. At the end of the trail, Gu Shizhou had not expected to see what appeared to be a glimpse of the galaxy. The view was so vast that they could not even see the borders at a glance. However, although it looked like a galaxy, what they saw was not actually the stars. They were spiritual crystals arranged in a unique array. These spiritual crystals seemed to be naturally very bright. Therefore, when they were placed in this dark abyss, they looked even more brilliant, just like the stars. Upon closer observation, the couple found that there was a dark red station under each of the crystals. As the surrounding was unlit, they could not see the base at first glance. Furthermore, the spiritual crystals were arranged just like a starry night sky, the crystals densely covered the sky, and the end could not be seen. In the central part of the galaxy, there was a small high platform that was built with gongs. It looked like a small moon that was rotating slowly in the middle of the galaxy. This view was stunning. One could easily feel as though they were up in the sky for a moment. Meanwhile, the cold wind was still present. In fact, the closer they got to the galaxy, the stronger the wind. Di Fuya's robe fluttered frantically while they were there. Gu Shizhou was caught in the moment, but after regaining her senses, she felt that this view of the galaxy was somewhat familiar to her. She was certain that she had seen it before. She also realized that the aura in the place gave her a dark and ominous feeling. The wind almost felt like the cries of the dead. Although she was protected by the wizardry barrier set up by Di Fui, she could still sense the extreme chill in the surrounding once they reached this place. Afraid that she was missing some details, Gu Shizhou used a spell to sharpen her vision of the galaxy. After observing everything here, she shuddered. These were wraiths. They seemed to be shielding the spiritual crystals or trapped in them. Either way, they must be the reason for the cold wind. These evil spirits were generally red in color. In fact, the more powerful they were, the redder they would appear. Oddly enough, the evil spirits here were pale. It was usually the grievances of the wraiths that caused them to be red. Had these spirits died without suffering? Or had it somehow been sucked away by the crystals and merged into the high red platform at the center? What is this array? Gu Shizhou whispered and asked the firmament stone on her wrist. The firmament stone was also confused. I don't know. There is nothing about this place in my information bank. Even the worldly firmament stone could not recognize it. Therefore, it seemed like this array was extremely rare. Gu Shizhou was about to reply to it, but Di Fui suddenly grabbed her. Quickly! Teleport us there. Gu Shizhou did not even question Di Fui and immediately teleported to the direction in which he pointed. Apparently, they had walked into a deadly corner of the formation. Just when they left, the evil wraiths suddenly burst into the scene at the place where they were initially standing. Chapter 2472, Rearranging the starry array. Many black shadows were flying around the place all of a sudden, and Gu Zijia's hands turned cold almost instantly. Those shadows were young bloody bats. There seemed to be more than 1,000 of them flying around the galaxy replica as if they were trying to absorb something. However, they must have been alarmed by something in the vicinity because they suddenly flew out of the area all at once, which felt as though a whirlwind was leaving the place. Gu Shizhou held her breath the entire time as she watched the bats exit the place from where she and Di Fui were standing. Had they not teleported away in time, they would have to face the wrath of the bats head-on. Instead, they were now in hiding in a quiet part of the array. To ensure their safety, Di Fui had cast a spell to conceal their breaths so that the bats would not be able to track them. Was this the home of the bloody bats? Where were they off to this time? Gu Shizhou and Di Fui looked at each other in hopes that the other would have a clue. Gu Shizhou asked, should we follow the bats? Di Fui was looking at the starry array and did not know what to think. Being lost in his thoughts, he did not even hear Gu Shizhou. Hence, she poked his waist and asked, what's wrong? Di Fui regained his senses and whispered to her, this starry array seems to be a bit familiar. He was certain that he had seen it somewhere but possibly in a slightly different arrangement. When he saw the stars, he had a sudden urge to rearrange them. It was as if something possessed him to put things in order. He turned to ask Gu Shizhou, when you were on Earth, did you ever make any starry arrays? Gu Shizhou shook her head. No, but I have always watched the stars. What about Huang Tu? Di Fui asked. Gu Shizhou was stunned by his question. I don't remember. Di Fui knocked his forehead with his palm. Was this part of his past that he could not remember? Thinking logically about the matter, he realized that despite Huang Tu's obvious abilities in the past, he was just the lord of the human world. Hence, he should now know how to form a starry array. Furthermore, if he knew how to do it, he would certainly have taught Gu Shizhou. So what was the memory in Di Fui's mind? Ah! Help! Someone could be heard calling for help from afar. Gu Shizhou was stunned by the voice. It seemed to come from the direction where the bats had gone. She pulled Di Fui along as she said, let's go and have a look. Before Di Fui could even reply to her, she had teleported with him to the direction of the voice she had heard. Because of her mastery over her teleportation technique, she could estimate locations very precisely. Soon, she found herself on a trigram-shaped platform with 18 pillars surrounding the area. There was a person tied to each pillar. To be more accurate, there were skeletons tied to each pillar as the people who were there had been killed by the bloody bats that swarmed over. Their fleshes were clearly eaten away. Gu Shizhou managed to take a glimpse of the bats in the area and noticed that their skin had turned from black to bright red after they entered this part of the cave. Although the place was too dark for Gu Shizhou to see every detail, she noticed that the bats had turned their attention to something above them. Hence, she simply followed them up and found that there was a hidden passage above them, which led to the outside. There was a jungle outside, and they could hear the roaring of beasts that seemed to be charging at one another. It seemed that this place was the origin of the bloody bats. The starry array was the culprit. Gu Shizhou clenched her fists in indignation. Di Fui held her little hand that was clenched and said, let's go back inside first. Okay. Gu Shizhou teleported back inside with Di Fui. The two stood in front of the starry array again to try to figure it out. Upon contemplation, Gu Shizhou said, let's destroy this starry array. We must stop all the trouble it is causing. When she was just about to perform a spell, Di Fui quickly grabbed her hand. Hold on. This array also supports the wizardry barrier outside the place. The bloody rain is raging outside right now. If we destroy it, the people of this city will be sacrificed. Gu Shijiu was stunned by his remark, and sweat started pouring all over her forehead. She had completely forgotten about the people in the city. She rubbed her eyebrows in disappointment and wondered what had happened to her recently. She was not as sharp as she used to be in the past. As she could not destroy it, for the time being, she gazed at the starry array trying to figure out her next move. She was somewhat unhappy by the sight and asked, "Are we going to let the bats continue to hurt the people and animals here?" Di Fui was silent for a moment. He had been devising a plan the whole time. "I can try to rearrange the starry array, perhaps, I can support the wizardry barrier while and also stop the bats from going out of control." Gu Zijia's eyes were gleaming with inspiration. She was surprised that Di Fui was so knowledgeable. "Did the Divine Lord teach you this?" Di Fui replied, "No. I never had a teacher in this field." Gu Shijiu was rendered speechless by his reply. Di Fui began to wander around the starry array with his fingers pointing around the place as if he was calculating something. As Gu Shijiu did not know what he was up to, she merely followed him and kept quiet so as not to distract him. Instead, she fended off any wraiths that came near to him. When she came close to the base of the array, Gu Shijiu realized that the spiritual crystal seemed to be connected to the ground. She tried to push one of the crystals, but it would not move. She quickly shared this finding with Di Fui. "I am afraid that the array cannot be rearranged." Di Fui seemed to shake his head slightly. "If you try to move it with force, it cannot be moved. However, with the right amount of force and technique, it should work." Apparently, he had already mastered the force and technique as He flew up to the moon-like platform and started to work. Like playing a game of chess, he lifted his sleeves and waved them in a specific direction on a spiritual crystal. In an instant, the spiritual crystal and the base below it moved silently. Everything happened very swiftly and gracefully. It was a dazzling sight. Standing near to Di Fui, Gu Shijiu somehow felt a sense of familiarity with the situation. It was almost as if she had seen him doing the same thing in his past life. Did it really happen in the past? Perhaps, Huang Tu had set up a starry array before, which left some residual memories in her mind. Being a master of array formations, Gu Shijiu could easily remember any arrays that she encountered before. However, she seemed a little dizzy with the one that Di Fui was rearranging now. The more she looked at it, the dizzier she got. She decided to take a few steps back and watch him on the high platform. Even though they were not very far apart, Gu Shijiu suddenly felt as though there was a gap between them. Perhaps it was not about the actual distance between them, but she somehow felt that no one could stand side by side with Di Fui. He was such a remarkable being with knowledge and abilities that were unparalleled. She could only watch him in awe. She suspected that she had been doing so for many years in their past life. Even though it was good to be with someone so worldly, Gu Shijiu did not have a very good feeling about the situation. Nevertheless, now was not the right time to think about it. She quickly shook her head and started to calculate the time they had spent in the cave. It had been more than 4 hours. Does that mean the bottled-up spiritual power inside Di Fui's body had somehow passed? As she pondered on the situation, she noticed that Di Fui suddenly lost his balance and almost swayed off the high platform. She was shocked and quickly teleported over and catch him, but the moment she held his arm, her heart sank. The changes in his body had started taking effect. His arms were hot, and his body was hot too. His face was faintly red, but sweat could be seen all over his forehead. "Master, his body is reacting." The firmament stone flashed a message in her mind. Swiftly, it attached itself to Di Fui's wrist in an attempt to absorb the overflowing spiritual power from his body. Once it attached itself to Di Fui's wrist, it immediately felt as though it was being scalded. Unable to suppress the pain, it quickly told Gu Shijiu, "Master, I am afraid that I can't take it much longer. You must. Gu Shijiu did not give it the option to withdraw. Di Fui seemed to be in excruciating pain, as well. He was trembling in pain but still tried hard to resist the effects. Gu Shijiu was trying to put his body in a suitable position to meditate, but he shook his head at her attempt. I still have the last two. He lifted his sleeve again, but he did not seem to have control over his hands. Therefore, he was unable to put together a spell with his fingers. You have to meditate now. Forget about the array. Gu Shijiu looked at his drenched forehead and grew anxious. No. If I let it be, this place will still exist, and who knows what disaster will strike next. I must move. Di Fui was determined to finish his work. He was just 2 moves away. Tell me how to move them. Let me do it. Gu Shijiu was also determined to make sure Di Fui stayed alive. To move this, you need to be at least at the level of a golden immortal. Otherwise, the grievances inside the crystals will consume you. Di Fui did not want her to take the risk. Gu Shijiu took a deep breath and was not ready to risk his life either. Let me try. She had already seen the spiritual crystal that Di Fui wanted to move, so she pinched her fingers together to cast a spell. It was actually the same spell that Di Fui had used. Quickly tell me the method to move it, let me try. At this moment, the spiritual power in Di Fui's body all haywire. He couldn't control the spiritual crystals anymore. He saw that Gu Shijiu could actually cast the spell and that she was determined to make it work. If he did not give her a chance, she would certainly be furious at him. All right, I will tell you the steps, but if anything seems wrong, please stop. Di Fui then told her how to move the crystals and also told her where the 2 crystals needed to be placed. Gu Shijiu needed to recite some kind of rhyme to complete the process. Although it was not long, it was certainly rather strange. Despite Gu Zijia's wealth of experiences, even she did not understand it. Fortunately, she just needed to recite it and did not need to understand it. As Gu Shijiu was undoubtedly intelligent, she managed to remember everything and started moving the crystals. However, she was nowhere near as graceful as Di Fui. When he moved these crystals earlier, it seemed like they were weightless as his movements were free and easy. However, Gu Shijiu did not have the same experience. Moving the small crystals felt as though she was trying to move a mountain. She needed to use all her strength. She felt like an ant that was trying to push an elephant. The grievances attached to the crystal were very reluctant to be moved. They had used their strength to stay in place as well. Gu Shijiu had been sweating all over but only managed to move one of the crystals a little. Unfortunately, the crystal was still several feet away from its intended location. Gu Shijiu frowned in disappointment. Judging from the difficulties that she was facing, it would take her several hours to move both crystals to their intended locations. That was assuming that she would even have any spiritual power left in her body to continue to move it. The firmament stone suddenly flew over and attached itself to her wrist. Master, my spiritual power has reached its capacity. Let me transfer some spiritual power to you. Chapter 2475, Rearranging the Starry Array, 4. Without waiting for a response from Gu Shijiu, it began transferring the spiritual power that it had absorbed from Di Fui. The sudden absorption of spiritual power was overbearing for the firmament stone, and it was eager to channel some of it away. While the spiritual power was being transferred, Gu Shijiu felt as though her veins were swelling up all around her body. It was a truly painful experience. The sheer discomfort that Gu Shijiu experienced from absorbing the excess spiritual power from the firmament stone made Gu Shijiu wonder how much pain Di Fui had been enduring. She decided to check on him and found that he was sitting like a Buddha in an attempt to meditate. She was a little relieved by the sight. In that brief moment, the firmament stone managed to transfer a significant amount of spiritual power to Gu Shijiu. In fact, she was worried that she would be able to experience a breakthrough in her power. Her original spiritual power was at level 9. 2, however, it became apparent to her that she was about to reach level 9. 9. once she passed the level of 9. She would reach level 10 and experience a catastrophe that would possibly allow her to ascend to heaven. However, now was definitely not the right time for her to ascend. It would certainly attract Yun Yanli's attention, and he would be here in no time. Thinking on her feet, Gu Shijiu immediately channeled the power she was receiving towards moving the spiritual crystal that she had been working tirelessly to rearrange. Due to the improvement in her spiritual power, she managed to move the crystal a little faster than before. Also, she managed to reduce the level of spiritual power in her body. Soon, the firmament stone had transmitted all the spiritual power it had absorbed from Di Fui into her body. It felt a bit tired, but since it now had the capacity to help Di Fui again, it quickly attached itself to his wrist and continued to absorb his spiritual power. It suddenly felt as though it was a device that could transfer spiritual power from one being to another. Although the procedure was tiring, the firmament stone had no other options. It continued to push itself, and without knowing, an hour had passed. In that time, Gu Shijiu finally managed to move the two spiritual crystals to their designated locations. The very moment that it happened, the cold wind that had been flowing in between the crystals suddenly disappeared. Instead, it was replaced by a faint, lukewarm wind that whirled in between the crystals as if it was comforting the suffering wraiths. The calm that replaced the stormy winds from before gave Gu Shijiu the assurance she needed that she was successful. There was no need for her to disturb Di Fui to confirm it. As usual, Gu Shijiu achieved the impossible by performing a task that only a golden immortal could do. Triumphantly, she cheered, "Success! How can I?" Upon looking at Di Fui, she stopped before she finished the sentence. Di Fui was still sitting there quietly. He was as still as a mountain, which made him look just like a statue. Gu Zijia's heart suddenly sank from the jubilant rush that she had moments ago. She rushed over and put her hand on his shoulder. Fui, upon touching him, she realized that his body was cold and hard. It felt nothing like touching human skin. In fact, it almost felt as though she was touching a piece of jade. Did he become a statue? Startled by this discovery, she quickly checked his entire body and realized that he had become a jade statue. The details on the status were extremely realistic, even his eyelashes were clearly defined. But how could he become a jade statue? Did Di Fui leave a jade statue here before he left? It was impossible. Gu Shijiu was confident that he would not leave her behind here. But if that were the case, was this statue really Di Fui? Chapter 2476, Would it be too cumbersome? Gu Shijiu subconsciously looked at her wrist. Fortunately, the firmament stone was still attached to it. It had been quiet for the last half hour, having constantly moved from Di Fui's wrist to Gu Zijia's wrist to transfer over Di Fui's spiritual power. Being so focused on moving the crystals from before, and she had not paid any attention to it. Little Tsang, what happened to Di Fui? The firmament stone did not respond. Had it also turned into a stone? Gu Shijiu flicked it with her fingers. Talk. The firmament stone did not flash. Perhaps it was too tired and had shut down. Her attention turned back to the jade statue, and she suddenly realized something. Di Fui was originally wearing a purple robe, but this jade statue was wearing a white robe. The material of the robe was also rather strange. It was not silk, but when she touched it, the material felt very smooth and warm. The bottom part of the robe was also designed in a rather unique fashion. It did not have dragons or phoenixes or flowers. Instead, it merely looked like the sun and the moon with a collection of stars. It was rather impressive and made him look as though he was a person of noble status. Was this really Di Fui? Was he so uncomfortable before that he found the need to change his attire? What was going on here? Gu Shijiu felt rather panicked by the perplexing turn of events. She leaned on his chest and tried to listen for a heartbeat but did not detect anything. After all, the figure in front of him was a statue. She called out to him, but he did not answer either. Did someone kidnap Di Fui and leave a statue behind to deceive her? She took a deep breath and tried to calm her mind as she started to think about Di Fui's features. The man had a good physique. Although he had been injured several times since he was young, none of the injuries left any scars on his body. It was perfect. In fact, it was too perfect that Gu Shizhou could not even tell if this was really him. All of a sudden, she recalled that there was a birthmark on top of his left thigh. The place was so private that if she had never had sex with him, she would never know that it existed. Hence, if someone tried to make a replica statue of him, the birthmark would probably be missing. However, to check the specific area, Gu Shizhou needed to remove his clothing. Unconvinced, Gu Shizhou stood there, contemplating whether she should remove his clothes. Would it be too cumbersome if she stripped it off? Nonetheless, if she did not, how would she be able to verify whether this statue was really Di Fui? Furthermore, since no one was around, it seemed like there was no downside. Hence, she went ahead and removed his robe. The moon was extraordinarily bright during the mid-autumn season of the year. In fact, it was time for the annual Mid-Autumn Festival. The round moon had risen high in the sky and was clear and bright. The clouds looked like pieces of cotton wrapped around the moon. It was certainly a breathtaking sight. On the bank of Taihu Lake, the moon was reflected onto the lake. It looked somewhat mysterious when ripples scattered the surface. Meanwhile, the surrounding streets were sprinkled with bright lights everywhere. There was a mountain peak in the middle of Taihu Lake. Although the peak was not very high, it was an excellent place to watch the moon. In a small pavilion on the peak, two people were sitting opposite each other. There were a few pastries and side dishes laid on the table in front of them along with a jug of wine. Chapter 2477, to come up with this idea. There were a man and a woman at the pavilion. The woman was dressed in red, while the man was dressed in white. Their appearances were undoubtedly stunning. Perhaps their attractiveness would catch anyone's attention. However, even though many people came to the peak of the mountain, none of them could see them. Apparently, they had set up a wizardry barrier around them. Leisurely, the man took a moment to observe the scenery around him. He sighed. Shuima, this is the modern life that you have been thinking about. Other than the slightly fancy lights and taller buildings, there is nothing special about this place. My divine lord, you have not fully understood my view of this place. The moon is always brighter athome. This is my home. Of course, I naturally think that it is the best place. You and I have finally come to this world in time for the Mid-Autumn Festival on August 15th. It is the day meant for family reunions. Can you be a little more positive? The man and woman at the pavilion were Shinjioli and Ning Shuima. In their adventures of traveling through time and space, they inadvertently fell into the wormhole and ended up in the modern world. As it was right about the time of the Mid-Autumn Festival, Ning Shuima took Shinjioli to the Taihu Lake to celebrate the festival. Shinjioli was a person who enjoyed the tranquility as opposed to large crowds, so Ning Shuima brought him to the peak of the mountain to enjoy the view of the moon. It would have been good if Nianma was here. Ning Shuima took a sip of wine and sighed after uttering her previous sentence. She still missed her son. In fact, she wanted to head to the Shura world to check on him. However, the Divine Lord did not let her go. He said that this was a challenge that Nianma had to endure on his own. Otherwise, it would create a bigger mess. Therefore, Ning Shuima had to ignore her desire. Nonetheless, to alleviate her concerns, Shinjioli occasionally opened a unique water mirror to check on the status of their son. The water mirror was developed by Shinjioli and proved to be very useful. However, the first time he opened the mirror, he was stunned by what he saw. He saw himself. But to be accurate, he actually saw an imitation of himself by Di Fui's comrade. As Kun Shui was very talented, his impersonation of the Divine Lord was very accurate. Ning Shuima could not help but praise the creature. He looks really similar to you. Of course, she could not help but take the opportunity to praise her son too. Our son is really clever to have come up with this idea. She then looked at Yun Yanli and frowned. What strange practices has this man been using? His skills have improved so quickly. He is already at the level of a great deity. Shinjioli looked calm. This is the work of the ancient sorcerer. Do you remember Luo Jiuchen? He created a peerless killer in a matter of months that almost destroyed the world. Yun Yanli is like an upgraded version of that peerless monster. Do you think Luo Jiuchen is the person behind this mess? Ning Xuema shook her head. Luo Jiuchen has locked away. When Nianma was born, he was only released for a brief moment. He was sealed away very shortly after that. According to my estimations, he would not have had any interactions with Yun Yanli. Shen Jiuli nodded. You are right. Perhaps, someone else is behind all this craziness. Ning Xuema felt rather uneasy at the thought of it. Divine Lord, Nianmo's spiritual power is too low. He might not be able to deal with Yun Yanli. Furthermore, if there is someone more powerful behind the scenes, I am afraid that. Why don't we go to the Shura world now to intervene? Shen Juli's fingertips seemed to have moved in a motion that suggested he was counting something. He then shook his head once he was done. No, Xuema, this is Nianmo's challenge. You and I cannot intervene. Otherwise, the situation will be worse. Will he be able to pass through this disaster? Shen Juli smiled and only said 2 words, don't worry. He closed the water mirror abruptly and changed the topic. Even though Shen Juli could keep his calm, Ning Xuema still felt uncomfortable about the events around her son. After barely a few hours, she brought up the topic again and asked Shen Juli to open the water mirror so that they could check on their son. She claimed that this festival required a reunion, and even though they could not physically meet, the least they could do was to observe their son through the water mirror. Shen Juli did not want to argue with her, so he opened the mirror again. The image that appeared on the mirror was Di Fui and Gu Shizhou looking at the starry array. His parents also observed the starry array for some time to try to decipher its mechanisms. Ning Xuema was the great devil, so when she saw the wraiths attached to the spiritual crystals, she frowned. She then asked Shen Juli, what is this sorcery? It looks so evil. No wonder the Shura world has no spiritual energy. This array has been absorbing all of its energy. And, if my guesses are right, there are more than one of these arrays in the Shura world. In fact, there should be at least 8 more that are sucking out the spiritual energy in the place and transferring it to the man behind the scenes. Well, it is no surprise that Yun Yanli has managed to develop so quickly. Can you crack it? Ning Xuema was a master in array formations, but this array made her feel rather uncomfortable. Shen Jiulu pondered for a moment. With our skills, it is not difficult to crack it. We can demolish it and also help the souls find peace. However, if we do so, it would be harmful to the entire Shura world, because we don't know what this array is connected to over there. Perhaps, it will affect the balance in the place. While discussing over their wine and food, they could also hear the audio around Di Fui. Hence, the dialogue between Gu Shizhou and Di Fui was audible to them. In the process, Ning Xuema heard Di Fui address Gu Shizhou as baby, and she could not help but giggle. Miss Gu should be 1,000 years old, right? On the other hand, Nianma is so young. She should be the one who addresses him as baby. Shen Jiuli took a sip of wine before responding, this girl is actually only 200 years old while Nianma. Well, he used to be much older than her. Used to. Ning Xuema clearly caught the key message. Do you mean that Nianma is the reincarnation of someone from Gu Zijia's past? Shen Jiuli paused for a moment. He had to figure out if he was allowed to tell his wife the truth. Ning Xuema pulled his sleeve in anticipation. Don't be so hesitant. Be direct with me. In a bid to satisfy her demand while protecting the heavenly secret, Shen Jiuli responded smartly, Nianma was Gu Zijia's better half in his past life. Ning Xuema remained silent, but she seemed to connect some dots automatically. Was he also called Di Fui in the past? Yes. No wonder you agreed for him to change his name, even his surname. Ning Xuema had heard something about Gu Shizhou, but she needed clarification. She has always been looking for a person in the upper bound. Was the person Nianma? Why did she not recognize him at first? In Nianmo's past life, the heavenly laws erased all memories about him. Naturally, Miss Gu could not remember him as well. She was merely looking for him using her instincts. Shinjioli sighed before continuing, they were extremely close in his past life. Ning Xuema kept silent for a considerably long time. Nonetheless, she kept her eyes on their son. I have always felt that Nianma does not look like you or me. Could it be that his current appearance is how he used to look like in his past life? Shinjioli faintly replied, no matter which couple gives birth to Nianma, he will not change his appearance. This is his original appearance. Ning Xuema was stunned. Was her son really that powerful? He must possess very unique genes if even the Divine Lord and Great Devil's genes combined could not change him. Chapter 2479, he felt that he had lived for too long. Who was he in his past life? While both of them were discussing, Di Fui had begun to rearrange the starry array. Ning Xuema had her eyes wide open as she watched her son on the high platform. He actually knows how to rearrange this starry array. Shinjioli found it quite captivating as well but was not as surprised as his wife. He said, it's not unexpected. This is what he used to do. Shinjioli had suspected that his son had slowly regained his memories as the Lord on earth. However, it seemed that he recalled his memories as the master of heavenly law first. Things just kept getting more and more interesting. It would appear that the purple cloud mushroom that Gu Shizhou let him eat seemed to be very useful in the end. Being an expert in array formations, Shinjioli could naturally understand the layout of the array made by Di Fui. He was truly amazed. Ning Xuema was also very proud of her son. I didn't expect him to be able to put together such a complicated starry array. She was not aware that Di Fui used to chart the fate of the world in his past life. This starry array had almost 10,000 of spiritual crystal, however, Di Fui was used to playing around with 100 million stars. Needless to say, it was many times more complicated than this one. This was probably just a children's toy for him. That being said, the boy had not discovered his true identity yet. Otherwise, he would not even show the slightest fear if he had to face 10 Yun Yanlis. Shinjioli was still rather surprised that Yun Yanli dared to challenge Di Fui. Perhaps, he felt that he had lived for too long. Shinjioli silently lit up a candle for Yun Yanli in his heart. If Yun Yanli only offended him, he would be kind enough just to kill him and let him be reincarnated. However, the person that Yun Yanli was messing with now, he could foresee that Yun Yanli would suffer from a miserable ending to his life. He might not even have a soul left to reincarnate. While being occupied in his thoughts, Ning Xuema suddenly tugged at his sleeve. Divine Lord, what happened to Nianma? Shinjioli looked at the water mirror and saw that Di Fui's body was undergoing abrupt, significant changes. Later, they saw that Gu Shizhou had replaced Di Fui in rearranging the spiritual crystal. Meanwhile, the firmament stone was busy like a bee jumping from wrist to wrist. As Gu Shizhou was busy rearranging the spiritual crystals, she did not see what had happened to Di Fui, who was behind her. Nevertheless, Shinjioli and Ning Xuema witnessed everything. In the beginning, Di Fui was meditating. His bodice veins were moving up and down like waves. It made Shinjioli's heart pound in his chest. For a moment, he thought that his son might even explode. Ning Xuema was more nervous than him. Divine Lord, didn't you say that you had given him a pill that he could use to save his life? You told him to use it at the most critical moment. Why hasn't he used it yet? Shinjioli turned his attention to Gu Shizhou and sighed. The pill has been given to someone else. Ning Xuema kept silent then and there. She knew what had happened and could not help but sigh. This kid has no memories of his past lives, but he has always been good to his wife. The couple continued to observe the mirror, eager to help if they could. However, they could not do anything as they watched Di Fui slowly turn into a jade statue. Di Fui wanted to say something to Gu Shizhou, but he could not speak anymore. The entire transformation happened in seconds. Ning Xuema was stunned to the point where she felt that her heart had risen to her throat. Divine Lord, Nianma. Shinjioli stared at the jade statue, and he looked surprised too. It seemed that he did not see this coming. Chapter 2480, to verify the authenticity was this kid. Was he going to discover his identity in advance? Ning Xuema was terrified by the sight, and her eyes were reddened. She grabbed Shinjuli's sleeves and said, "Divine Lord, what has happened to him?" "Xuema, do you know how butterflies come from cocoons?" "Yes. The butterfly is merely a worm before it turns into a butterfly. Before it becomes a butterfly, it has to be enveloped by a cocoon." "Why are you asking me this question at this time? Are you trying to suggest that this jade statue is his cocoon?" Shinjuli nodded. "You could say so." The man was curious whether Di Fui would recall his identity as the Master of the Heavenly Law or Huang Tuesday. Who would he be? Ning Xuema was a little relieved upon hearing Shinjuli's explanation. Nonetheless, she was still curious, when will he break out of the statue? Shinjuli did not know the answer as this was his first time witnessing such an event. All he knew was that a butterfly would generally take a few days to break out of its cocoon, so perhaps Di Fui might also take a few days. "Do you think Miss Gu is startled by the fact that our Nianma has become jade statue?" Ning Xuema was wondering what she would do to the statue. She didn't see Nianma actually change into a statue. What if she suspects that Nianma had been kidnapped? Or worse, will she crack open the jade statue to check if it is him? Shinjuli silently paid attention to Gu Zijia's actions. It was clear that Gu Shizhou was surprised by the turn of events. Although she was trying to stay calm, it was evident from her fingers that she was trembling in fear. Although Ning Xuema was worried that Gu Shizhou might crack open the statue, seeing her worried for her son gave her a sense of delight. Simultaneously, she also felt like jumping in to tell Gu Shizhou what was really going on. Fortunately, Gu Shizhou did not crack open the jade statue. Instead, she began to remove his robe after some careful thought. Ning Xuema was obviously shocked by her actions. Payak. Along with a sound, the water mirror disappeared. Shinjuli had kept the mirror. It was inappropriate for them to watch any further. What was going on? Why did she strip off his clothes? To verify the authenticity of the statue. Shinjuli responded briefly. Ning Xuema was speechless. They are. Have they shared an intimate moment already? Xuema, Nianma has grown up. Furthermore, they were originally husband and wife. It could be implied from these statements that the two of them had already been intimate with one another. No wonder when I look at Miss Gu, I could feel that something is not right. Is she pregnant? Ning Xuema generally paid more attention to her son than to Gu Shizhou. However, she did have a strange feeling that something was not right with her. Shinjuli seemed to have chalked all of a sudden. This. I didn't pay attention. How could he pay attention to the belly of his daughter-in-law? However, upon further contemplation, it could be true that Gu Shizhou was pregnant. That would mean that Shinjuli would soon be a grandfather. That made him somewhat disappointed. Ning Xuema pulled him up all of a sudden and said, "Divine Lord, let's go and look for them. One of them has become a jade statue, while the other is pregnant. Furthermore, they are in such a dangerous environment. Shizhou will not be able to protect them both. We have to help them." Shinjuli sighed. He had been hiding something from her but decided to tell her the truth. "Xuema, we came to this world by accident. It would be difficult to return to heaven, so I can only imagine that it is even harder to go to the Shura world. We might not be able to get there even in 6 months." Ning Xuema remained silent. Gu Shizhou finally removed every piece of clothing from the jade statue. She saw the birthmark at the top of his thigh. Of course, inevitably, she also saw something that she probably should not have seen without permission. It was the same size as it was in her memory. The discovery was both terrifying and comforting at the same time. At least she knew that it was really him. All of a sudden, a vision came to her mind. Gu Shizhou suddenly remembered removing the clothes off a jade statue. Hence, what she just did seemed to be a repeat of the past. Gu Shizhou tried really hard to remember the scene because she had guessed that the jade statue from the past was also a real person. Perhaps, that would give her a clue as to how to deal with her current predicament. She looked at the jade statue in front of her again, and a thought popped in her mind. Was Di Fui simply meditating? After verifying that the statue was really him, Gu Shijiu was trying to put on his underwear. In the position that he was seated, it was rather easy for her to remove his clothes. However, it was quite tricky to wear it back for him, and she could not let him be naked the whole time. Although there were many sculptures of naked people, she did not want people to see Di Fui naked. In the end, she wrapped a piece of cloth around his lower body and temporarily stitched it with a thread. She was trying to sew it into a pair of trousers, however, she was not very skilled at using a needle. As Di Fui always dressed in fine clothing, the trousers that she sewed on were completely incomparable. In fact, it was considered rather ugly. Fortunately, Di Fui had worn a long robe over his body. Therefore, as long as he did not make any unnatural body movements, no one would be able to see the trousers inside. Upon placing Di Fui's robes back on his body, she stood in front of him and observed his jade-like face. It made her feel a little bit uneasy. If Di Fui had intentionally turned himself into a jade statue to meditate, would he not know that Gu Shijiu had completely removed his clothing? Perhaps, like a real statue, his veins had hardened, and his senses had disappeared. It would not surprise Gu Shijiu if he had no awareness of what was happening around him. Having heaved a long sigh, Gu Shijiu decided to think of her next plan of action. As danger awaited them with any wrong turn, she had to think about her next move very carefully. The people of Legua City were pleasantly surprised to find that the bloody rain that would have taunted them throughout the night had suddenly stopped at midnight. The bloody bats that periodically crashed into the wizardry barrier throughout the night had also reluctantly retreated as the bloody rain disappeared. Although the wizardry barrier around the city could protect the safety of the people in the town, the torrential blood rain coupled with the vicious attacks from the bats could occasionally cause the barrier to be broken. If that were to happen, the people in the area would surely face a disaster that could possibly even take their lives. Therefore, the people would stay vigilant throughout the nights when they expected the blood rain to pour. Needless to say, they were well aware that the rain had stopped abruptly. Everyone was surprised and also uncertain about what was going on. Many discussions were floating along the streets, with various questions and assumptions made. Less than an hour after the rain had stopped, the people on the streets witnessed a large explosion somewhere in the direction of where the city owner lived. It shook the whole city for a moment, and then and there, they witnessed a rush of colorful lights into the sky. These lights seemed to have consumed the dark clouds that had initially occupied the sky. The sky was now blue with streaks of white clouds. Needless to say, the people of the city were stunned by the entire scene. Had the God in heaven finally seen the sufferings in the Shura world? And, was that God here to save all beings? Even the young palace master, who had been tasked to search for Gu Shijiu and others, was stunned. Suddenly, the people witnessed a statue rising in the midst of the colorful light. The statue was wearing a white coat that looked like snow, and its belt was fluttering in the wind as if he was a god that was formed from the colorful light. As everyone was quite far away from the source of the light, they could not see the face of the god clearly. However, the scenes were shocking enough. Someone in the crowd suddenly screamed, "God! God has come to save us!" The status had caused a stir among the people. Some were in tears, while most had already kneeled. "God, please save us. I beg you to please save the Shura world." Many others had chanted similar wishes. The people who were hiding in their homes had also emerged and requested for their savior. In their repeated chants, more and more people started to cry. In fact, it was so united that the cries echoed like a wave throughout the city. "Only you can save yourself." A voice seemed to come from the statue. The god they were groveling to had responded. Silence consumed the surrounding as the people fixed their eyes on the statue. The disastrous bloody rain and bloody bats were caused by evil spirits from a wicked array. Today, I have changed the array to benefit the people. You may come to the city owner's residence and see for yourself. There are a total of 9 evil arrays located underground in the 9 cities of the Shura world. Spread this news to the other cities so that they can find the location of the evil array. While the voice was speaking, countless flyers seemed to be falling from the sky. Everyone naturally grabbed one to read. The young palace master and her people had initially hidden in the dark. However, they had to figure out what was going on as soon as they could so that they could inform Yun Yanli. The young palace master shouted, "Who are you? How dare you confuse the people here?" She levitated into the sky and rushed towards the statue. Ha! The authenticity of my statement will be verified once they find the other arrays. The godlike figure suddenly smiled and disappeared along with the colorful lights. The young palace master rushed to the position of the statue but could not find anything there. Eventually, she looked down and was utterly stunned by what she saw. The residence of her master had been flipped over, revealing the starry array that was beneath it. Being Yun Yanli's confidant, the young palace master naturally knew the magical effect of this starry array, but she had not really been able to study it. She did not know the original order of the starry array either, so she would not have a clue of how to put everything back in place. The only thing she knew was that the cold grievances hovering in the starry array had disappeared. A glowing and positive aura replaced it. Someone had changed the starry array and had now exposed it publicly to the people. This was disastrous for the young palace master and his team. This is the work of the Devil King's followers. They are trying to deceive everyone. Do not believe what you had just heard. The Shura world had been cursed for many years now, which had caused the weaker people to perish. Since only the fittest could survive, the people in the city were generally considered extraordinary people. They were talented and knowledgeable people, and some of them were even masters. It was not easy to fool them. Someone in the crowd suddenly spoke, "Whether it is true or false, we will know after we see it for ourselves. Everyone, let's go and check the array." With one order, countless people rushed to the house that shone with colorful light. The young palace master was speechless. She knew that something was not right. When Yun Yanli rushed back to Lagua City, it was already noon. When he first entered the city, he found that something was wrong. Initially, people worshipped him at every corner. They would greet him respectfully and send him well wishes. However, after his starry array had been exposed, the people naturally doubted him. There was an air of hostility around them. There were still people who greeted him but only a few. Furthermore, the streets would usually be bustling at this time of day, but it was rather cold and empty at this moment. Instead, it seemed like his house was the only busy place. His heart sank at the realization that something was wrong. But what had happened? At lightning speed, he flew over Tohi's official residence to survey the area. He was utterly shocked to find that his official residence was blown up, and his starry array, which had been buried deep underground, was now exposed to the public. Moreover, for some reason, a propitious light surrounded it.